Well, it's been 3 weeks since the last time that I've been in the workshop. Went away for work, like I said. So the goal today, which is January 26, 2023, the goal today is to go ahead and get the right elevator closed up. I've got a lot to kind of get organized after being out of the workshop for so long. So it'll take me a little bit to get set up, but the parts that I primed right before I left have had plenty of time to cure, so that's good. So stay tuned, and let's see what we can't get done today. I'm only home for 3 days, so try to get the right elevator closed up. I don't think that I'll work on the leading edge bend for the elevator yet. I'll put that aside. I did get the replacement stiffeners for the vertical stabilizer, so I think I'll go ahead and get those taken care of and possibly riveted on before I leave town again. And then also this saga of my horizontal stabilizer front spar continues. I got the replacement part for that, so if I find myself with enough time on Saturday before I leave, I'll get to that as well. Anyways, that's it for now. Stay tuned. Starting off with edge finishing on the skin, you'll find that not only are the edges of these things sharp, but they have these little bumps in them that are left over from the laser cutting. Putting them up in the cradle and using a Vixen file works pretty well. I also picked up some chainsaw files from Lowe's that are actually pretty handy. Here you see that I finally got smart enough to use the squeezer to do dimpling on smaller parts. This is so much easier. Shocking that it took me this long to figure out that works better. Coming up here shortly, after we get into the sort of basic assembly of the skeleton, I'll get into dimpling the skins, the remaining holes where the skins will attach to the spars and to the ribs. That will happen on the DD214, but you do run into spots where you can't get into real tight spaces for dimpling, and so I use two different examples of close quarters dimpling methods here, one for the skins and one for the ribs where they come into tight spaces. Takes a little bit of experimenting to get these techniques down right. These are tools that you don't use very often, but I can tell you if this is something that you're considering doing and this looks like an optional tool, it's really not. You need it. And if you try to create a dimple in some other manner than using these tools, you're probably just going to booger it up. So here I am dimpling with the DRDT2. One thing that I do like about this setup is that it can slide back and forth, so I can vary the depth of the reach into the material. But coming up here next, we start getting into close quarter dimpling, and I'll explain what that's all about. What I'm doing here is working with a close quarters dimpling set. There are places where you just can't get in with the DRDT2 dimpler or a rivet squeezer, and you still need to make a dimple in the skin. So in this example, you use a little contraption with a rivet puller to pull a dimple into the skin. It's basically a little set of dies that uses basically a nail as a mandrel. And in the second picture there, you can see how with a piece of sample material, you thread the nail through there, put the female die on one side, the male die on the other side, and then start pulling with it. And it makes a pretty good dimple. You're going to have to do this in a few places like this spot here where you're really close to a narrow bend in the skin.
Finish up a couple more dimples in the skin near the trailing edge, and then we'll move on to hitting the tight corners in the root rib. Here I'm installing a different type of close quarters dimpling tool for heavier material, in this example like ribs where they come to a really tight bend and you can't fit a squeezer in there. You drill this onto the bench and you can see that there's a female die there. Once it's installed, you can place the material over the female die and then use something like the ram from a C-frame, or in my case a ram from the rivet squeezer and a hammer, insert the male die, and then basically pound it down on there carefully, not to break your ram. But it's pretty effective. It's, I would say, a necessary tool. I don't know how else you get away with doing that without having that on a bench. So the close quarters dimpling tool is now installed on the bench, and you'll see me down there in the end trying to get those last 2 or 3 dimples on both sides of that rib. If you have a C-frame, you can take the ram out of the C-frame and put the male die in there and do it. I don't have a C-frame. I have a DRD-T2, and that ram isn't really removable. So what I ended up doing was taking the ram out of my squeezer and very carefully setting those rivets with a hammer on that. If you have to do that, I would suggest that adjustable ram, threading it out a bit so you don't risk binding the threads when you're hitting it with a hammer. I've been lucky so far. I've had to use it several times, and so far no damage. Now I'm getting into the riveting of the spar assembly. There are doubler plates or reinforcement plates on both sides of the spar, and then some heavy nut plates that mount to it. At a certain point, you'll see me move over to the drill press. It took me a minute to figure out what I was doing there when I look back at this video, but I think that I boogered up one of those universal head rivets, and I wanted to be able to drill it out really carefully. That's what's going on there. My battery ended up running out here before I finished up the night. I actually did finish up the right elevator on this evening, but in the video you only see me basically getting through a portion of the riveting of the rear spar. Or forward spar, or only spar, I guess, on the right elevator. But it's actually done, and here's proof. This will kind of show up in the beginning of the next day's video.